What most people never understand about an empath is this: their breaking point is almost never sudden. It does not happen in one loud fight, one dramatic scene, or one weak moment. No, it builds slowly, quietly, and almost invisibly, day by day, experience by experience, pain stacking on pain until the weight becomes impossible to carry. An empath does not react the way people expect. When they are hurt, they do not strike back right away. They think deeply. They analyze everything. They search for reasons. If someone disrespects them, they do not instantly judge. They wonder, maybe that person is struggling. Maybe something is wrong. If someone turns cold or distant, the empath does not pull away. They move closer. They give more love, more care, more patience, thinking maybe support is what is needed. And that is where the hidden process begins, because what looks like patience from the outside is often a silent battle inside. The empath keeps balancing their own pain against what they believe others deserve. They ignore their own warning signs just to keep the connection alive. And little by little, something dangerous starts to happen. They begin accepting what should have never been accepted. Every time a boundary is crossed and nothing is done, something shifts inside them. No one sees it, no one notices it, but the empath feels every second of it. Instead of speaking, they store it. They tell themselves it is not worth conflict. They convince themselves that understanding matters more than reaction. So they absorb the pain like a sponge. And this is the part people never notice, because empaths rarely show pain loudly. They do not announce every disappointment. They do not list every betrayal. They do not complain about every wound. But inside, everything is recorded, every broken promise, every moment they felt unimportant, every time their love was not returned, every effort that was ignored. And here is the truth most miss. There is a difference between endurance and self-abandonment. Endurance has limits. It is conscious. But when tolerance goes too far, it becomes losing yourself. And many empaths cross that line without realizing it. They are no longer staying because they want to. They stay because they feel they must. Because they have invested too much emotion to walk away now. So they give more. They explain more. They become more patient. They try to fix problems they never created. But while doing that, they teach others a dangerous lesson. That access to them has no cost. That forgiveness will always come. That they will always stay. And this is how imbalance is born. While the empath increases effort, the other person often gives less. Not always from cruelty, but from habit. Human behavior follows patterns. If there are no consequences, no resistance, no loss, behavior usually gets worse. Still, the empath remains, not because they are weak, because they love deeply. They do not connect halfway. They do not care casually. When they choose someone, they commit with heart, mind, and soul. So leaving feels painful. It feels like losing something meaningful. But then, the turning point begins. The more they ignore their inner voice, the louder it becomes. What once felt like small discomfort becomes exhaustion. What once looked like patience becomes emptiness. What once looked like hope becomes something far more powerful, clarity. And when clarity arrives, everything changes. The empath begins to see that it was never just one bad day, never just stress, never just misunderstanding. It was a pattern, repeated again and again. And once they see the pattern, everything they held inside suddenly connects. Every memory, every wound, every excuse they made for someone else. This is why their breaking point shocks people, because others only saw today. The empath was carrying the entire history. So when they finally go quiet, when they stop explaining, when they pull back without warning, it is not overreaction. It is the final chapter of a story that has been building for a very long time. By the time you notice their distance, the decision was already made inside. Because an empath does not break when they are hurt. They break when they realize the hurt was never going to stop. And once that truth settles into their heart, they never return as the same person again. There is also another moment, one even more powerful. It usually happens in silence. No fight, no drama, no big scene, just a normal day, a normal conversation, and suddenly something inside clicks. They stop asking, "Why is this happening?" and start asking, "Why am I still making excuses for this?" That single question changes everything. Because once an empath stops justifying behavior, the fog begins to clear. The inconsistency is no longer confusing, it is obvious. The neglect is no longer temporary, it is repeated. The imbalance is no longer accidental, it is real. And then comes the hardest truth of all. They were needed more than they were valued. That realization hurts deeply, but it also sets them free. At first, clarity does not feel strong. It feels cold. It feels strange. It feels like distance, because clarity destroys the comforting lies that help them stay loyal. It removes the story that said, if I just try harder, things will change. And without that story, only truth remains. That is why empaths often detach emotionally before they leave physically. Conversations feel empty. Effort feels one-sided. The urgency to save everything disappears. But this is not cruelty. This is healing. They are no longer reacting to potential. They are finally responding to reality. And then another shift happens. They stop trying to be understood by people who never tried to understand them. This is not bitterness. This is wisdom. They stop wasting energy explaining themselves to closed hearts. And that is when others notice something has changed. The empath is still there, but different. The constant availability is gone. The automatic forgiveness is gone. The endless emotional access is gone. What others call distance, the empath calls peace. Because for the first time, they are not acting from fear of losing someone. They are acting from truth. And once an empath reaches that place, they do not argue, they do not beg, they do not chase. They simply see clearly. And once they truly see, the illusion ends forever. Because the awakening of an empath is not the moment they stop caring. It is the moment they finally understand what they were carrying all along and decide to put it down. What happens when an empath detaches is often misunderstood. People think the empath has turned cold, distant, unavailable, or uncaring. But the truth is far deeper than that. They have not shut down emotionally. They have reorganized emotionally. For a long time, an empath lives in a high-alert emotional state. They notice everything, every change in tone, every shift in behavior, every hidden tension in the room. They do not only hear words, they sense what is behind them. That gift creates deep connection, but it also creates deep vulnerability. Because when someone keeps giving emotional energy in a one-sided relationship, something silent begins to happen. They start doing the work for two people. They fill the gaps in communication. They predict needs no one says out loud. They hold the emotional balance for the entire connection. They become the glue. And at first it looks like love. But underneath, it is exhaustion. It is emotional labor no one sees. It is carrying weight that was never theirs. And when the empath finally reaches the limit, the shift is not dramatic. There is no explosion, no screaming, no chaos. There is only silence, but not empty silence, intentional silence. The kind of silence that comes from someone who has already processed more than they can keep explaining. And this is where people become confused, because they were used to the old version of the empath, the one who explained everything, the one who fixed tension, the one who softened hard moments, the one who repaired misunderstandings before they became problems. That version was always emotionally available. But when detachment begins, that system turns off. Not because the empath cannot care anymore, because care is no longer given without limits. That is the difference most people miss. Detachment is not lack of feeling. It is the removal of unlimited access. It means the empath stops reacting instantly to every emotional trigger that once pulled them in. And when that happens, something powerful appears. Calmness, but not the calmness of peace, the calmness of clarity. They are no longer debating every interaction inside their mind. They are no longer turning confusion into patience. They are no longer absorbing someone else's inconsistency and trying to stabilize it. That hidden work ends, and when that internal work ends, their outer presence changes completely. They speak less, but with purpose. They stop rushing to fill silence. They stop over-explaining boundaries. They stop rescuing uncomfortable conversations. And to those who benefited from their constant effort, this feels like loss. But to the empath, it feels like freedom. Because for the first time, their energy is no longer being spent managing everyone else's emotions. It is being redirected inward. into self-control, into observation, into healing, into truth. And here is what most never understand. The empath did not withdraw from connection. They withdrew from imbalance. They did not stop caring. They stopped overcompensating. They stopped turning inconsistency into potential. They stopped confusing intensity with intimacy. And once that stops, relationships built on emotional imbalance begin to shake. That is what others call distance. But the truth is simpler. The empath is no longer carrying what never belonged to them. And this is where real power begins. Not power through control, not power through dominance, power through restraint. Because most people react when triggered. They chase, they explain, they fix, they panic. But the empath learns something rare. They learn to pause, they learn to observe, they learn to choose. And in that pause, power is born. Choice over who gets access, choice over what deserves attention, choice over where energy is invested, choice over who no longer belongs in their life. This is why detached empaths are misunderstood. People call them indifferent. But indifference is blind. The empath is not blind. They still see everything. They still understand everything. They simply no longer feel forced to respond to everything. That changes every relationship around them, because now access is no longer automatic. It must be earned, through respect, through consistency, through reciprocity. Anything less no longer reaches them. So what looks like emotional distance is actually emotional precision. And once an empath reaches this level, they stop being driven by fear of losing people. They start being guided by the memory of what it costs to keep them. And that truth changes everything. Their silence is no longer pain. It becomes a decision, a quiet decision that ends every unhealthy dynamic, without needing one final argument. But this is not the end of their story. It is the beginning of their strongest chapter, because once an empath sees the pattern, steps away from imbalance, and stops draining themselves, something new rises underneath all the pain. Structure, not chaos, not emotional survival, not desperate connection. Structure. And that structure becomes boundaries, but not the kind people think. Boundaries are not angry walls. They are protection systems. They are how pain stops repeating. Before this lesson, the empath lived through adaptation. They adjusted. They accommodated. They softened themselves to keep love alive. But after enough hurt, something changes forever. They stop asking, "How do I make this work?" and start asking, "Does this deserve access to me at all?" That question changes their life. Now every interaction is filtered, not judged, recognized. They spot patterns faster. Inconsistency is no longer a puzzle to solve. It is a warning sign. Confusion is no longer attractive. It is a signal to step back. And this is where self-respect stops being word and becomes behavior. They no longer ignore discomfort to keep connection. They no longer wait for people to notice their needs. They no longer stay where honesty must be begged for, and understand this clearly. They did not lose the ability to love. They refined where love goes. Their time is no longer wasted on confusion. Their attention is no longer handed to inconsistency. Their emotional presence is no longer free. It becomes conditional, not transactional, respectful. And suddenly, people who depended on their overgiving feel absence. What they call rejection is simply the end of free emotional labor. The empath is no longer balancing relationships that were never equal. And in that empty space, the truth of those relationships is exposed. But inside the empath, something even greater happens. They stop measuring worth by how much pain they can endure. They stop proving love through sacrifice. They stop confusing suffering with value. Instead, they build identity through choice. Choice over who stays, choice over what is tolerated, choice over where love belongs. And when choice becomes the foundation, chaos loses all power, because chaos only controls what has no structure. Boundaries create structure, and structure creates peace. This is where emotional intelligence becomes emotional authority, not control over others, control over self. They no longer need to announce boundaries loudly. Their actions speak for them. They no longer repeat limits again and again. Their behavior enforces them. They no longer need approval. They are internally aligned, and alignment creates something rare: consistency. No more conflict between what they feel and what they accept. No more betraying themselves for connection. No more abandoning intuition to keep others comfortable. From the outside, this looks like transformation, but from the inside, it feels like returning home. So when people say they broke the empath, they misunderstood everything. Breaking was never the ending. It was the doorway. What came after was not damage. It was definition, a clearer identity, a stronger standard, a wiser soul. And once an empath learns the truth, they never return to the version of themselves that confused endurance with love. Because now they know something irreversible. Not everyone deserves access to your depth. And once that lesson lives inside them, they move through the world forever changed, not louder, not colder, but unmistakably wiser.